Good morning and welcome to Unusual Activity powered by Financial Juice with George Avedon and Milton Marmonides. Lots going on this morning. Risk on trade this morning. S&P futures higher by 22 and 23 points at 1873.50. We'll get into the specifics in a moment. Let's recheck. Let's see. Housing starts just coming through. 1,017 versus the expected 1,008. Excuse me, 1.017 million versus the 1.008 million. Excuse me. USA building permits month over month. September, 1.5% versus the expected or estimated 2.8, revised from a negative previous revision of negative 5.1 to 5.1. U.S. Building permits September number 1.02 million versus the 1.23 estimated, prior revised from 1 million to 1 million. Actually, it was, excuse me. So just to recheck of those, U.S. housing starts 1.017 million versus the expected 1.008. U.S. building permits 1.5% versus the 2.8 estimated, and for building permits, that was month over month. This is building permits 1.02 million versus the 1.03 million estimated. So let's get involved in just a recap of yesterday's markets. If you remember correctly, I'm sure you do, a bit of a rather volatile last few days. We've hitting some really key support levels here and bouncing from that. Additionally, we saw Bullard, the common spike in the early morning. We saw that this S&P 500 really taking off on that. Dow Jones finished at 16,117.24, down 0.15. S&P 500 1862.76, basically flat, up 0.01%. Nasdaq higher by 0.05% at 4217.39. That parenthesis should be in a different spot. My apologies. So if you remember, we had a really big off trade in the morning. We had the Bullard common spike indicating that the Fed should possibly extend quantitative easing. That basically put a bid in the market. There was some continued volatility, but really rebounding into the close. One trader mentioned, when you're watching the evening news, you see it's a nothing market, but nothing, not too much activity. But the reality is, it was a really volatile day, and really, traders were very engaged in yesterday's trading. Coming into today, a few things on the geopolitical front. Certainly the ISIL issues. There's a bit of a little bit more pressure on Turkey to respond on their border with that. This consistent mention of the Article 5 with NATO. This is the Washington Treaty, and there's discussions whether or not the airstrikes can contain that the growth of ISIS, and should there be quote unquote boots on the ground. And even this morning there's conversation, should that happen, who will be engaged in that. And as we said yesterday, folks, we're coming into midterm elections in the U.S., and this no doubt is if it hasn't become already, will become a political issue should more activity kick up with respect to boots on the ground. So Also, continued discussion of the Russian economy with respect to EU, Eastern Europe, China. We've discussed this, that there's growing stories of how Russia is beginning to have conversations with Russia with respect to trade, energy, raw materials. So again, that's a developing story, and I think that's just the beginning there. As long as the sanctions as long as the sanctions from the West continue, I think Russia will be, at least at the very least, under pressure to consider other relationships. So moving on, as you saw, housing starts this morning. This morning, also, just a few minutes ago, Janet Yellen began to speak at 8:35. Folks, lots of activity on the Fed speakers recently, and clearly, and the reason why we bring this up, clearly um, they have an effect on market. For example, Bullard yesterday, we saw this. We even discussed this in the unusual activity pulse edition yesterday, midday. Fed speakers have had an effect, will continue to have an effect, and it's something to keep an eye on. Econ 101 teaches us that even an intention or even a mention of potentially doing something on a macroeconomic level certainly has effect on markets. So I think that's really critical to listen to, read these comments that are coming out of the Fed speakers. Consumer sentiment at 9:55. Something coming out of the European Union that's positive is we have a European Automobile Manufacturing Association was higher. Indicator was higher by 6.1%. I think that's the highest in quite some time. They attributed this to some price reductions from Volkswagen. So again, it's a better number. It's an interesting number, and certainly something positive coming out of Europe with respect to the prospective downturn in economic activity. So in overnights, let's take a check on overnights in Asia. Nikkei was down 1.4%. Hang Seng up 0.53%. We had Shanghai lower by 0.65, so a bit of a mixed market in Asia. In the EU region. So if we take a look at the FTSE, currently higher by 0.88%, CAC in Paris higher by 1.82%, DAX in Germany 1.9%, and the IBEX in Spain is higher by 2.17%. So we're definitely seeing a risk on trade this morning. Getting into some of the a little bit more macroeconomic, financial side of things. Russia, there's been reports that Russia is putting more money into supporting the ruble, shoring up the ruble. So far, the numbers that are coming out are approximately 13 billion right now from the Bank of Russia. So right now, the figure that's coming out of Russia, that they have a $451.7 billion reserve that they've built up from higher oil prices, certainly the lower oil prices. And I remember this from crisis time in 2008 when oil really began to slide, really had a impact on the Russian cash reserves there. So I think that's a really important number to monitor there. Also, higher something mentioned in terms of high yield bond prices are beginning to be attractive for institutional investors. Mention of PIMCO and BlackRock, they're eyeing this, that the yields have become very high. Certainly we know that's inversely related. So higher yields, lower prices, lots of cash on the books. So that's something to consider, and the caveat in this is the junk bonds have lost about 2% in the last month. One of the reasons that's in conversation, that's going around desks and and so forth, is the ECB signaling to begin purchasing of assets within days. So we saw Bullard yesterday mentioning that we are possibly extending QE. We mentioned that um, we mentioned that now ECB signaling of beginning purchasing assets within days. So again, clearly, central bankers have an effect on um, on markets, clearly. Out of Sweden, Riksbank may cut rate this year and introduce a currency floor, according to HSBC. Again, really watching that. Also, we've been bringing up Greece. Greece negotiates precautionary credit line. So again, yes, we had a positive out of the automotive manufacturing, but again, really keeping an eye on the European economy here. Um, let's jump into commodities, energy, and raw materials. Again, just a quick check of the futures, higher by 25 now. So really big turnaround from yesterday's morning. Futures at 1875.25. Crude oil higher by 94 cents. It was higher this morning, a little bit off its high in the morning. Currently at 82.89. It's crude heating oil higher by 0.0152 at 2.4849. Gasoline higher by 0.0037 at 2.2146. Gold at 1238.10, lower by 3.1. Silver at 1738, negative by 0.06. Platinum at 1257.07 is actually flat this morning. Cocoa higher by 33. So again, we'll see how that comes into the open here. 10-year yield. We're seeing a bit of an improvement from recent days, well, not improvement, a higher yield, excuse me, higher yield at 2.176, and the 30-year at 2.94. Remember, yesterday we had a 30-year at 2.78, if memory serves me right. We have a little bit of a kick up in the yield curve towards the longer maturities. So interesting dynamic there that's coming out. So again, we're going to go into, before we go into Ebola, let's go into some of the top insider purchases. We have HIB director purchasing 21,000 shares at 935. AYI director purchasing 8,000 at 122.94 cents. Nothing yet in pre-market. And OPK, we tend to see this. Stock in play with respect to purchases. 20,000 shares at $8.33. So a couple of things in the news, and then we'll recap a little bit more on the technical side of the markets. Goldman Sachs commenting on crude oil, indicating that there's not a glut yet. There's not a glut in oil. They saw the decline in oil too much too early, quote unquote. So again, keeping an eye on oil. Perhaps that's where we're having a little bit of a tick up in oil this morning. Apple, just to mention, certainly they had their iPad event yesterday. They're beginning to have their iPhone 6 China debut. So Apple currently in pre-market at 97.50 currently again. So finished the day just around 90, just below about 96.25 or so. Also the Greek Stock Exchange higher by 6.8%. So we are having this kind of a reversal, whether it's temporary or a little prolonged reversal of sentiment, at least this morning, with respect to European and the futures. few other interesting bits that's going around desks this morning. Precious metal funds worldwide attract 20 million inflows, the first inflows in 8 weeks, according to Bank of America. Again, so we know that there has been a significant decline with respect to commodities and raw materials, energies, metals as well. So, again, keeping an eye on that. In syndicates, TTPH, we have a pricing 3.95 million shares, secondary at $19. Currently, the stock in pre-market is indicating at $20.25. So again, that's the syndicate that's going around desks right now. A couple of research items that's going around will make that bigger in the deck that we provide for the repository. Q Logic upgraded to buy from hold at Summit Research. Q Logic currently in pre-market at $10.40. See how that comes out. So XLNX Xilinx upgraded to outperform from market perform at Wells Fargo at $40.30. URBN Urban Outfitters downgraded to neutral from buy at Goldman, currently indicating at $30.02. Goldman Sachs upgraded to outperform. Certainly, we had their earnings yesterday. Upgraded to outperform at Keefe Bruyette. So, frankly, I always find it fascinating when analysts upgrade or downgrade each other. So, kind of an interesting dynamic there. Goldman currently in pre-market at 175.13. Quantum QT WW we have initiated as a buy at MLV and Company. Nothing yet in pre-market. Once that comes in, we'll let you know. Tesla TSLA initiated with a buy at also at MLV. Tesla currently indicating pre-market at 232.55. Also, let's see, CLNE Clean Energy initiated with a hold at MLV and Company, target of 8. Uh, Forgive me, Clean Energy initiated with a hold at MLV and Company, target of 8, currently indicating, let's call it $7.54. AKS Nomura upgrades AK Steel Holding Corporation to buy, raises power price target to 10. AKS currently at $6.22. Excuse me, AKS. So AKS Steel upgrades price target 10, currently at $6.02. So we'll see how that translates into the open. SUNE Sun Edison upgraded to outperform from market perform. A Cowan price to target to 24 from 24. SUNE currently at $16.65. Currently in high this morning. $16.66. So I know we have some questions. We'll take a look at that. Bear with me. We'll read through that question, and as we're going through this, a couple of thank you, Hugo. A couple of things that's coming through. CCL, Royal Caribbean. There was news this overnight that there was a ship couldn't dock because of a passenger that may have had contact with Ebola virus. Reason for stop. She showed no symptoms, but again, I think we'll continue to see this. There's a lot of political pressure. There's a lot of lots of activity with respect to governments and how people respond to this kind of. So Carnival Cruise Line currently at $33.95, and Um, RCL currently at $55.59. RPRX down over $4 after meeting with FDA. Excuse me, RPRX. Also, CF Industries announced that the company and Yara International have terminated their discussions regarding a potential merger of equal transaction. INCY CFO leaving to pursue other opportunities, see if that has an effect on the security. Nothing yet in pre-market, currently indicating 52. URBN, we think it's prudent to anticipate weakness, could extend into the holidays. It's Goldman. So again, a little bit of cautionary note there. Let's see. Currently, URBN indicating 30 in pre-market. CZR announced prepared to begin formal talks with bank debt creditors. Caesars Entertainment indicating currently at $10.26. AAMPE up 13 on encouraging results of osteoarthritic drug, and that's $4.64. CYTR CYTR is up on presentation of their aldoxorubicin drug. Excuse me for that pronunciation. And that's so it's currently at $2.94 in pre-market, high in pre-market, $3.12. Milt, if we could spend a little bit of time on what we saw yesterday, and perhaps coming into the market, what you're seeing, a little bit of quite a bit of a rebound. Is this a change in sentiment? Is this did we see that capitulation yesterday in the markets?
Well, like I mentioned yesterday, you want to see capitulation is currently when you open up a pretty decent lower and you have strong buying throughout the day with a nice close. Yesterday we had strong buying with a nice close. Today we have a very large gap up. We mentioned numerous times that we need to see Europe turn, and Europe clearly is up. You have Greece up over 6.5%. I'm sure everyone else is up about 2%. It's going to be an interesting day to see what happens. You had Janet Yellen right now speaking, nothing really significant coming out. You had the home numbers early this morning, which are decent in lines. The permit's a little lower. So we're looking at the market this morning. We're up 178 on the Dow. We're up 24 handles on the S&P. It's going to be an interesting day. It's a Friday, so we're going to see what the reaction is, what the market does, and keep an eye on every indicator. From the VIX, we're going to keep an eye on oil's up a buck. We're going to watch the 10-year. We're going to watch everything across the board to see if everything lines up to slowly change the mindset of the trader now, because we had a very vicious drop. And yesterday we had a nice little reversal, even though we didn't close high a lot, but we closed and we had a decent number, a decent day. You had Google come out yesterday after hours. It was down like $30 pre-market. Now it's, let me just take a quick peek. Google's up on the day, so it seems like today may be one of those days where it's a risk-on type environment. You had GE come out with some good numbers. That's up about 4% pre-market. It's going to be one of those days where you, in all reality, should not go crazy until you get consistency. You had one pop one day. Let's see a continuous move. Let's see the market build a little floor here, and then we can, evaluate positions moving forward. Other than that, the VIX, we watched the VIX. The VIX is going to get hit again this morning. Closed yesterday at 25.20. It went into that resistance number we mentioned for days, the 30 to 31, 32. Hit it, sold right off. So technically, it's doing the right thing. Now we have to see it do the right thing regarding the markets. Right now we have a very strong open. We'll see if it holds into the day today. We'll see if there's any selling in the afternoon. We're having some positive Russian and Ukraine comments coming through the wires as we speak. It seems like the day is one of those days where things are all positive. So unless we hit a out of the blue negative headline during the day, you could see a nice move today. The risk is on clearly across the board overseas and in the U.S. Lots of positive news this morning, and it feels like we need a little bounce. The market's been really sold off. Technically, I know MACDs, RSIs, they're all oversold, so you may get a short bounce. The question is will it be lived? Will it be a short-lived bounce, or will it be a bounce where you can see 3, 4, 5% to the upside? We'll never know that. We'd like to see the action today. We'd like to see strong action. If you're a bull, you'd love to see some strong action today. Even if you stay at these levels, but as long as you don't break down, and if you see red today, we may have another issue again, because you want the bulls' confidence to stay strong. You want to see continued strength throughout the day. You want to see a nice close into the weekend, and then coming in on Monday, as long as nothing happens over the weekend, you can see the continued strength. But the key is for the bulls, you want to see strength throughout the day. And just make sure you watch all your indicators, watch what you're watching, and at that point you make your decisions.
Milt, a question from one of our listeners is over the next Milt, over the next 1, 2, 3 days, anything that you're looking at in terms of the Nasdaq 100, anything that's sticking out for you over the next, let's say take today. Let's say we finish positive today.
George, I'm going to cut you off right there. The one thing you have to watch, the only thing that matters, is Apple. Apple reports on the 20th. Apple reports on Monday. If Apple comes out and it's horrible earnings, the Nasdaq will crack. If Apple comes out and the earnings are good on Monday, you may see a bottom in this market in the Nasdaq. But as of now, technically, the Nasdaq is clearly at support. The support level is around 41.50 to 42. We're in that support level. If Apple does not disappoint and you come in and Apple's down $10, $15, you may have had a short-term bottom in the Nasdaq. But if Apple comes out and it's down $10, Apple is the beast. If Apple's down, you can have a contagion effect. Like 10 other companies are going to be hit just because of that Apple news. So you have to keep an eye on Apple on Monday. Have to see the way it trades. Google clearly was a non-event. Google came out, was down $25 after hours. It's up on the day. So that's out of the way now. Even though they had bad earnings, it's out of the way. Right now, everyone, in my opinion, I've spoken to a few people this morning regarding it, everyone's waiting for Apple and to see how the market reacts to what they say. Other than that, technically, we're in the range. We're in the support. So unless it's broken and quote-unquote, Apple will, not quote-unquote, but Apple will be the one that could dictate continue to the upside or a break to the downside on Monday. Or it will be a non-event and the market in Nasdaq just stays in its support until it's either it breaks the resistance or it breaks the support levels. So we're watching that. We're watching that that event on a Monday after hours.
No, Milt, I think that's a great point. And remember, Apple is approximately 3.2% of the S&P 500. So clearly that has an effect on volatility and perception specifically. Also, Hugo, again, thank you for the questions. Just a thought there. Hugo put out there is perhaps getting long the DAX, short the Nasdaq. Basically is really as Milton said, really looking for that Apple earnings. We'll see what other information comes out of Europe with respect to economy. That's an interesting take on things. One of the things, Milt, and this is a question, we discuss this all the time. When you have these severe moves to the downside, it's almost expected you have these also severe moves to the upside, correct? I mean, that is normal in this type of environment. And it's to be expected that we continue to see this type of raw, I would say emotional moves either way. Would you say?
Of course, like I said, it's typically a faster move to the downside and a stair step up on the upside. But with the kind of movements we had lately in this market, it won't shock me to see a 2, 3, 400 point up day when things start to settle. But the question is when will that happen? Today could be the day. Like I said, you have to see the action. If you start seeing the market selling off, and let's say, God forbid, the market goes red on a day when the markets are up, 160 handles, 160 points in the morning on the Dow futures. If you see red, it's not that bullish in my opinion.
Okay.
You want to see consistency. You want to see strength. You want to see the bulls taking charge and saying, you know what, this is it. This is, you've had your 7% correction. You had your 8% correction here and there. This is where, we're gonna stop it and we're gonna start to turn it. So we'll see how the bulls act today, and we'll see what the reaction will be from the bears.
Thanks, Mel. A couple of things we want to get back to, bring it down to individual stock levels. XLNX and TXT up over 4% on earnings. A couple of things coming out of China in terms of they want to punish polluting car makers. Rules take effect November 1st. Here's some stocks that may be affected with that. Again, so that's coming out of China. And again, we'll make some calls to see what possible effect that will have on anything else with respect to that particular rule. SLB says Russian sanctions had 0.02 percent impact on Q2. Again, one of the things that's will begin to come out is the fact that we saw the the geopolitical impact of the sanctions. We're now seeing that the Russian economy impact from the sanctions, specifically, in relation to China. Also, let's see if we're beginning to see the specific companies discussing that effect from the Chinese, from the Russian sanctions. Okay, GEOS downgraded at Cowen. That's just coming through. This morning, nothing yet in pre-market. A few other things that's coming through. We haven't put it up there yet, so we'll bring them in as we're seeing them. Few things with Hong Kong. I know the larger the larger protests seem to have at least calmed down, but it seems that a few more clashes there in Hong Kong. Again, we'll see if we can get some clarification with that. News that's coming through: Russian President Putin says results of Ukraine talks are good after ending meeting with Merkel, Holland, and Poroshenko in Milan. So again, this is some of this geopolitical moves. Perhaps this decrease in commodities and oil that Russia is absolutely dependent on is maybe softening the conversation a little bit. GE. That's up in pre-market. We have GE currently up $25.08. Tops estimates as cost cuts drive margins. And again, folks, we've mentioned this before with here and with our guests, this notion of where's the top line growth with respect to cost cutting, and we introduced that the buying of their own securities, of their own stock, and with a bit of financial engineering. So that's very interesting. BEAT's up in pre-market. Biotelemetry announces reinstatement of Cigna Corp coverage of mobile cardiac monitoring services. So that's BEAT up in pre-market. OXF, Oxford Resources, to be acquired by Westmoreland, WLB. That's so OXF higher in pre-market, WLB higher in pre-market. SRPT, higher in pre-market, reports publication of encouraging phase 1 data for Ebola and Marburg virus drug candidates. That's SRPT. So folks, add that to your Ebola names. Currently SRPT at 2441. Q Logic, we talked about this. Up in pre-market, tops Q2 earnings per share by 3 cents. Announced a 100 million stock buyback. QLogic currently at up in pre-market. Bear with me, it's like technical. Up at $10.31 and pretty high as $10.51. Certainly higher than the close of about $9.55 yesterday. Again, we're going to see as we had a decrease in the stock prices clearly all around, markets being down. We're going to see a little bit more of these announcements of stock buyback. So again, they're coming in with that. Morgan Stanley basically smashes expectations, and shares are surging. Currently at $33.80, up about 4% in pre-market. And SanDisk, lower in pre-market, earnings beat. They issue fourth quarter guidance, which is weak. SNDK at $83.85. So as you know, we did want to bring up just briefly. I know. Folks, you know, a lot of rumors coming out of this Ebola, a lot of, you know, it's just how you manage your trading, and how perhaps introducing an Ebola stock into your regular trading mechanism, you know, it certainly depends on the trader. So again, certainly the Spain situation, Dallas, second healthcare worker, they were transferred. Lots of CDC statements. Lot of these fear rumors throughout the day, and really taking a look at that, and how are airlines going to deal with this? How are travel companies going to deal with this? Cruise lines we saw this morning, and that reaction. So I think we'll just continue to see the amount of Ebola stocks in play. So we'll see how that works out. Also, just on a biotechnology side, there is this concern that there's possible mutation in the virus, and it's just long story short, it's just going to make it more difficult to treat should that happens. So just a quick check of where we are in Europe. The FTSE up 1.03%, CAC in Paris up 2.08%, DAX in Germany up 1.95%, DAX, the IBEX is higher by 2.57%. We have the future still maintaining a real risk on this morning at 20 higher by 23.75, 1875. Crude oil up by 52 cents at 82.46, and so we'll monitor that. Also, so again, we may see that 85, 85 and a half level come if we see a precipitous increase in the crude oil. So as we're beginning to wrap up, we want to thank you folks for contributing questions. We want to thank you folks for being a part of our program. We look forward to doing a unusual activity pulse as well. Sometime around midday, we'll announce that. We thank you for joining. Looks to be an interesting day. We'll see if that capitulation over perhaps a 2-day period uh, comes through. Uh, Also, just there's something coming through with Twitter. Higher in pre-market, Twitter lets users stream music, audio via SoundCloud tie-up. And also Pandora may be an interesting play off of that. So again, really keeping an eye on that. So just wanted to put that in. We just saw that coming through. Again, we wish you folks a great day. Thank you for joining us on Unusual Activity, always powered by Financial Juice. This has been George Avedon and Milton Marmonides. Thank you for joining us, and happy hunting.